What's going on, baseball fanatics? Jeremy Laracuente here for the Baseball Banter Broadcast, and on this installment, I will be bringing you my unofficial Hall of Fame ballot for 2022. But before we get into it, if you haven't already done so, make sure you smash that subscribe button, as it does a huge service for us here in growing this community. Let all your baseball friends know that this is the channel to watch in 2022. Let's get into it. Now, I do have to preface this by saying that this is going to be one of the harder and more controversial ballots because of several people that are going to be on the ticket this year for the very first time, namely Alex Rodriguez and David Ortiz. Now, no matter where you come down on the market of the PED era, the steroid usage in Major League Baseball during the late 90s and early part of the 2000s, there's very little doubt that there was a change in the game during that time. And no matter who you feel was right and wrong in the situation, we don't have concrete proof as to who was using and who wasn't in most cases. Now, yes, if you failed a test and were subsequently suspended, that to me means that you should not be on the Hall of Fame ballot. Now, as we look at this year's case, there's going to be two very controversial figures added to two already controversial figures. Yes, David Ortiz and Alex Rodriguez are coming onto their first ballot, as Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds are heading into their last. This is going to be an interesting debate going through this Hall of Fame time and Hall of Fame voting, and when the vote is actually announced, who makes the cut and who doesn't will be very interesting to watch. Now, I've been very honest and very vocal about the fact that if you have failed a performance-enhancing drug test, since MLB has put those measures into place, I think that you should not be enshrined in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, that being said, it's very difficult for me to even say that, as my favorite player, Alex Rodriguez, was suspended for the longest amount of time related to performance-enhancing drugs. Now, while A-Rod did not specifically fail a test, he did admit to use after the test had been put into place, as well as having that suspension. But enough on why A-Rod did not make my list. Let's get into exactly who did. Now, we look at the obvious and foremost candidate. To me, that's Barry Bonds. There's very little doubt about it. I mean, the man had 7 MVPs, 14 All-Star appearances, a Home Run Derby champion, 8-time Gold Glove winner, 12-time Silver Slugger, 2-time batting champion. This is an absolutely Hall of Fame worthy player. Now, yes, there was a ton of speculation and rumors and innuendos about Barry Bonds growing several sizes over one summer, becoming the most prolific home run hitter of a generation. However, when you look at what Barry Bonds was, even before the PED suspicions, this was a Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Famer, in my opinion. Barry Bonds is still the only man in Major League Baseball history with over 500 home runs and over 500 steals. You pair that with the fact that he was an 8-time Gold Glove winner, a 7-time MVP, and there's very little doubt that had there not been the suspicion of performance-enhancing drugs, this would have been a quick, very quick, surefire Hall of Famer. We look at a man that is the exact thing that Barry Bonds is on the hitter side for pitching, and that is Roger Clemens, the 7-time Cy Young Award winner, MVP winner, 2-time pitching Triple Crown winner, as well as All-Star Game MVP, and 7-time ERA champion. This is without a doubt, without the PED controversy and some of the more recent things that have come to light about Roger Clemens, would absolutely have him on board. Obviously, the morals clause can be something that gets used against both Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, but to me, the Baseball Hall of Fame is about the on-field statistics. And again, when it comes to Roger Clemens and the PED suspicions, this is going to be a player that, even before all of that, was a no-doubt Hall of Famer for me. Now, the third player that I want to speak about on my ballot for the Hall of Fame is that of Scott Rolen. I think when you look at Scott Rolen, this is a case of a player who gets compared to some of the greatest of that position in the history of the game. And yet, he matches up most favorably to many of those Hall of Famers. I think when you look at the fact that this was a 8-time Gold Glove winner, a 7-time All-Star, and a Rookie of the Year, yes, there was a lot of injuries that took a lot away from him during his later years. But there's no doubt about it, when you watch this player play, this was an absolutely amazing third baseman. Now, yes, it's not all about defense. This was also a guy who could come in and be a middle-of-the-order bat for several teams throughout his career. I think that Scott Rolen often gets overlooked as one of the best in third base history, but that's why he makes my Hall of Fame ballot. Now, as we look at the fourth player on my ballot, is another controversial figure, and it is that of Curt Schilling. I think that when you look at what Curt Schilling was, this was one of the best big game pitchers. Yes, there's all kinds of controversy surrounding him for off-the-field things. To me, that should not affect what he did on the mound. I think that there's no doubt that this was one of the most feared pitchers during his era. I could not stand watching Curt Schilling come up to pitch against the Yankees during that 2001 run. This is also a player that I could not stand watching pitch against the Yankees when he was on the Red Sox. That, to me, is a player and a pitcher that is absolutely worthy of the Hall of Fame. Now, as we look at the fifth player on my list, we look at a reliever that, to me, does not get nearly enough credit for how good he was, and that is Billy Wagner. When you look at Billy Wagner, outside of the innings pitched, his numbers are very close to that of Trevor Hoffman, arguably the second greatest closing pitcher in the history of Major League Baseball. The National League Relief Award is named after Trevor Hoffman, and when you look at the numbers, they fare very comparably outside of innings pitched to Billy Wagner. Now, obviously, those innings are a significant deal, but I think when you look at how good he was and how effective he was during the innings that he did pitch, it did not diminish his ability and his value as a relief pitcher. If Billy Wagner were to have a bit more innings, this would be a clear-cut case of a no-doubt Hall of Famer in my mind. So why not put him in? That's why he makes my list. Now, the next player on my list often gets knocked because of his home team, and that is Todd Helton. The career Colorado Rocky deserves mention and deserves placement in Cooperstown. I think when you look at the fact that he was a 3-time Gold Glove winner, 4-time Silver Slugger, 5-time All-Star, and having to do so at that high altitude, this was a player who was definitely worth inclusion in the Hall of Fame. Yes, we have heard tons about how much more the statistics can be amplified by Coors Field. However, you also have to take into account that half of his games were played away from Coors Field. And we've heard a numerous amount of times about the fact that the effects of Coors Field positively when you're there do affect you even more so when you're away. Breaking pitches will break differently in Colorado than they do outside of it. So you have to make those constant adjustments. To me, Todd Helton was one of the best at it. And there's a reason why he was able to be such a valuable player for a Rockies team. Now, yes, over the last several years of his career, there was a lot of injury concern. But I think when you look at his numbers in the case of Larry Walker, who, yes, was a better all-around player in my opinion, but to me the case of Larry Walker also gives leeway to the case of Todd Helton. He should not be penalized for the fact that he played his entire career with the Colorado Rockies. That's why Todd Helton makes my Hall of Fame ballot. Now, the next player on my list is an absolute defensive wizard. The next two players actually on my list are defensive wizards, but we begin looking at the case of Torii Hunter, the 9-time Gold Glove winner who played predominantly center field throughout his career, is definitely meriting inclusion in the Hall of Fame. Yes, the offensive numbers may not be quite what some of the other offensive center fielders were. However, when you compare his all-around game, there's no doubt that Torii Hunter was a step above the rest. I think sometimes because he was playing during the same era of Ken Griffey Jr., he often gets overlooked for how valuable of a contributor he was. To me, Torii Hunter is definitely a Hall of Fame player. We follow that up with the case of Andruw Jones. I think Andruw Jones is an absolute defensive beast in center field. And while I may not subscribe solely to the idea of Gold Gloves, being a 10-time Gold Glove winner in center field is absolutely a testament to his ability. And like many others on this list, injuries did play a big factor in a tailing off towards the end of their career. But at this point, to me, they had already solidified their case. And obviously, when you look at the Hall of Fame, there's going to be a lot of debate comparing and contrasting. To me, Andruw Jones doesn't fall towards the bottom half of center fielders in the Hall of Fame. To me, he's directly in the middle, borderlining on the top tier echelon. And that's why, to me, he merits inclusion in the Hall of Fame. Now, the ninth player on my ballot is here for one specific reason. And when you look at the voting rules of the BBWAA, if you do not have 5% of the vote, you fall off the ballot. It happened to a great number of players, Bernie Williams, Jorge Posada amongst those. But the reason that Joe Nathan makes my list is because I think that his case deserves a bit more of a look. I think that when you look at deeper into his numbers, this was a very valuable pitcher for quite some time. Joe Nathan pitched for 16 years. And because he pitched during the era of Trevor Hoffman and Mariano Rivera, to me, constantly gets overlooked. I think that Nathan was a very valuable pitcher throughout his career. And that's why he deserves a bit longer of a look and a bit more of an inclusion in the conversation. Now, I think that when you look at the way that the balloting is done, the fact that if you don't have 5%, you fall off, to me, could be something that Joe Nathan faces. Therefore, he makes my list so that he does not fall off the ballot. Obviously, as I said before, I don't have an official ballot, but if I were an official voting member of the BBWAA, this would be one player that I would include to make sure that he gets a longer look. Now, here is where the controversy begins. With the final spot on my ballot, I have selected David Ortiz. Now, yes, there's obviously a lot of speculation. David Ortiz was on the Mitchell Report, same as A-Rod, Manny Ramirez, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, amongst others. But when you look at the case of David Ortiz following the institution of the rules in Major League Baseball, he did not find himself suspended or testing positive for steroids. This is why David Ortiz has to be on this list for me. As much as he was a thorn in the side of myself and every other Yankee fan, there's very little denying his ability. Now, to me, the case for David Ortiz is not a slam dunk case as it might seem for others. But the fact that Edgar Martinez is already in, this is the next best designated hitter in my opinion. The 10-time All-Star and 7-time Silver Slugger is one of the most recognizably clutch players in the history of the game. And while clutchness may not be a factor that goes into many Hall of Fame voters' balloting reasons, there's no doubt that David Ortiz was the best at what he did. Yes, he's going to get knocked down because he was just a designated hitter. He was terrible at first base, and that's why he did not last. Had he been right-handed, he likely would have been put into the catching position and not lasted either. But there is no doubting that this is an absolutely Hall of Fame level bat, and he deserves inclusion. Now, yes, like I said, there is controversy with that selection because of the fact that there is going to be a connection with David Ortiz and Alex Rodriguez with PEDs. But as I said, A-Rod cannot make my list as much as I would love to add him because of the fact that he was suspended for the longest amount of time in baseball history relating to that of PEDs. Now, yes, I don't think that it should hold anybody else's ballot against it. I do know that there are some of the actual legitimate voters that did put Alex Rodriguez on the ballot. And if I hadn't already had such a hardline stance on this issue, I would absolutely be having A-Rod on my list. But I want to hear from you guys. Let me know down in the comment section below who makes your ballot. Let me know your 10 spots as your official, unofficial BBWAA voting ballot. Let me know who would make your Hall of Fame ballot of 10 going into the 2022 class. As always, keep it locked in here to the entire GLMG family with the Granite Geek Show, Weesibs, and of course the Baseball Banter Broadcast. Links to their channel will be down in the show notes below. If there's anything that you guys would like to see us cover here on the Baseball Banter Broadcast, let us know that down in the comment section as well. So I will catch you guys with the latest news, notes, and my personal thoughts, theories, and opinions on the game of Major League Baseball. Peace.